Hello and welcome to another episode of Agency Leadership Live. I'm Chip Griffin, and we are here today to have a conversation about how video and podcasting can work for you. So that's what's on tap. Let's get into the show. And my guest today is Jason Falls. Let's go ahead and bring Jason in here. Are you hearing an echo, Jason, or is that just me hearing it on myself?
I think it's just you. It all sounds great to me.
Well, that is fantastic. It is always great when I can hear the audio twice. I have no idea why that's happening. So, good times. Welcome to live shows, folks. I see what it is. It's the Restream preview monitor is apparently rebroadcasting it to myself. So I'm going to close the Restream window.
There you
that
go.
should work better. So
that'll work.
So really happy to have Jason here. Jason is someone who has spent a lot of time with all sorts of social media, blogs, podcasts, and now video. So he should have lots of great insight for all of you who are trying to think about how to integrate some of these tools into your own agency growth and promotion efforts. And, you know, it's me and Jason, so who knows where this conversation will go, but that's where we're going to get started. So welcome to the show, Jason.
Thanks for having me. I've watched several times, and I know you peek in on mine from time to time as well. So I almost feel like this is just an extension of both of our shows.
Well, you know, it does seem like everybody is doing video now. It sort of feels like, 10 or 15 years ago when everybody was doing podcasting. At least for a little bit. And I think obviously given the current circumstances, video is here to stay for most of us. I know in my own business, I plan on using it for quite a while because I don't plan on getting on an airplane anytime soon.
Yep. That's true. Yeah, it's been amazing to see the proliferation. It reminds me of back in the day when everybody had a blog. All these blogs started popping up in 2004, 2005, and it was companies, and then it was these online experts, the talking headset. And I was one of those too. So, and then for a while there was a little brief pop of people jumping in and having their own YouTube channels, at least in the marketing space. But then there was the podcast kind of thing happened there from 2006 to 2008. And then that kind of died off for a little while. So I think but this is different because, as you said, you're not planning on traveling anytime soon. The social networks are prioritizing video in their feeds. It's more human. It's more engaging. It's stickier content. And so people are just wising up and saying, well, if I'm not doing A, video, or B, live streaming, I'm probably missing out on a good portion of people that could be consuming my content.
Right, and it's become so much easier to create good content. I mean, the last time around when people were creating their YouTube channels, it took a whole lot more effort to do it. Now, you and I were talking before the show, you can do it pretty easily. You and I both tend to overcomplicate things a little bit to have a little bit more fun. We were comparing notes about some of the software that we use, and it's. But the point is, it allows you to have a lot of flexibility in this. And I think as many of us are doing talks and workshops and those things remotely, you want to have that kind of flexibility.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and even on the video projects that I do now that are not live, like it's complex for me. It's like, and like you said, we overcomplicate things. I try to make sure I got to have the right music and I got to have the right graphics and it's got to be edited real smooth and all that good stuff. And that doesn't necessarily have to be the case for, brands or agencies or even, influencers out there today, because I think the consumer has gotten used to, hey, this is really good, enriching content. I don't care about the polish. But at the same time, you want to hold yourself to a standard. I don't want to put Cornett content out there that doesn't look and sound good. You don't want to put, things out there for agency leadership that doesn't look or sound good. So the recorded stuff can be a world of a problem for me. The live stuff is a lot easier for me simply because I can throw up the camera and I know, because I've got a broadcast background, I can still provide pretty good content and have really good engaging conversations with people in a live setting. So that makes it a lot more fun. If you've got the capability to hold the audience and have conversations in a live setting, then you've got a huge, upside potential for your agency. If you don't have the right, I hate to call it talent because I'm referring to myself and I don't like to call myself things like that. But if you have the right talent in place, you've got a lot of upside potential to use live streaming to advance your cause.
Absolutely. And you talked about engagement. So if you're watching this live, feel free to use the comments on whatever platform you're on to share your questions, your feedback, or, well, just to heckle me and Jason, because we're fine with that too. We've got thick skin. And I don't have the
Yeah.
bushy beard, but everything just glances off because of the extra glow I've got going.
Oh, it's the other way. He's the before, I'm the after. There you go.
But, wow, let's not go there. But let's share with viewers a little bit about tell them about Cornett first, and then we'll talk about some of your multimedia
Sure.
activities.
So Cornett's been around about 40 years. Kip Cornett, our founder, is still very heavily involved in new business and whatnot. So it's a family-owned business, independent business, fiercely independent business. Christy Heiler is our company president, and her husband Whit is one of our executive creative officers. So it's a very small, kind of independent, family-oriented business. Been around for about 40 years, and it's in Lexington, Kentucky. And so a lot of people are like, well, what does Lexington, Kentucky have to offer? How can an advertising agency really succeed there? Well, we don't just have clients in Lexington, but the clients that we do have in Lexington are brands like Tempur-Pedic, Stearns and Foster, and Sealy Mattresses. They're headquartered here. A&W Restaurants is headquartered here. We are, kind of the creative agency of record for the Sazerac family of bourbons. So Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, 1792. We do also handle a lot of stuff for tourism clients like the Buffalo Trace Distillery, the local CVB Visit Lex, which does fantastic creative work. Keeneland Racetrack, the University of Kentucky is a client. Valvoline has been a client in the past. So we work with national and global brands. Some of them happen to be here, but we've also done work for, some large consumer, product companies and whatnot from around the country that aren't here. And I would say about 15 years or so ago, probably in the mid 2000s, was when Cornett made this kind of pivot from a traditional advertising agency to really being a digital first agency. And they were one of the first agencies, at least in the Midwest that I know of, that really made that concentrated shift to digital first. And they called me about 3 or 4 years ago and said, hey, we're trying to solve some problems with content and social media and social strategy. What do you think about coming in and helping us? And I just kind of came over, and I'd known Whit and a couple other people here for a long time. And it was just a great fit for me. Right time, right place. And I'm loving what I'm doing. And they're giving me the freedom to do things like Digging Deeper and Winfluence and a lot of other things that benefit the agency and bring in new business, but also sort of help me continue to capitalize on my strengths, which is doing stuff like this.
Right. Well, and that's a perfect segue. It's almost like you've done something like this before, Jason. So in recent times, first of all, you've been a long time innovator and entrepreneur in this space. You've built businesses, you've created a lot of things, but recently you've created Digging Deeper, and I think that's something that should be of interest to other agencies to learn how Cornett is using a video live stream / podcast in order to help promote itself. So talk a little bit about Digging Deeper, how it got started, and what it's doing now.
Yeah, it's actually kind of I think it's a fun story. Other people might think it's boring, but I think it's kind of fun. It started when Facebook Live first emerged, a couple of years ago. I had a Tuesday morning chiropractor appointment at like 7:30, but it was so close to the office that I would get in at like 7:50. Like I'd go have my adjustment and then I'd leave and I'd be in the office before 8. And so I started just throwing up Facebook Live and talking to people about what are you working on today? What's going on? And after a few weeks of that, just playing around, having fun with my Facebook, fans and friends and followers, whatever you want to call them over there, I realized, whoa, there's more than a dozen people, watching this on a regular basis. I should maybe do something with this. So it started out as something called Go Ahead Caller, and then I called it the Jason Falls Show, which I hated because I didn't want my ego to be part of this. But I was like, I can actually start talking to other people in the industry, and going back to my old Social Media Explorer TV videos where I would interview people from years ago, which I stopped doing for whatever reason, which was probably a mistake. But I'm like, I'm going to start interviewing people and mining their brains for insights that people in the marketing world can use. And I've got probably about 40% of my audience is, 8 brand side people, 40% is agency side people, and then 20% is like government, nonprofit, entrepreneurs, other. But basically, I try to interview someone who has something interesting to say about the marketing world, Sometimes it's timely news oriented stuff, and sometimes it's a startup entrepreneur who's got a new thing that we want to talk about. I try not to focus on products or services. I try to pull back and say, let's talk about philosophically how the marketing world works in your brain. But I really just try to mine guests for opinions and insights. And then in June of this year, I kind of made the decision leading up to that to say, I don't want this to be about Jason Falls. I want this to be about Cornett. Christy Heiler, our president, was gung-ho about having, sort of a live stream podcast property that could be a thought leadership platform, for Cornett, something to help get our perspective on the world out there and be useful to the greater community. And so it's been called Digging Deeper since then, and is doing a nice job for us.
And so, I mean, are you choosing the guests because they're interesting? Or are you choosing them strategically to help the agency? Talk a little bit about the sort of the thought process that goes behind it, because I think a lot of folks who might be thinking about doing video for their own agencies, may be curious about that.
Sure. So I'll be completely honest with you. My goal with every guest is I want someone who can make me smarter, who I know will then make the audience smarter. And I don't really have a filter beyond that. Now, I try to, because our focus, our theme, our tagline is we make creativity your business advantage. So I typically try to put it through the filter of how can this person's expertise come out in a creative conversation? Whether it's how are you creative using strategy? How are you creative using media planning and buying? How are you creative actually creating art, for the clients, that kind of thing. So I have a very broad filter for what I look at. But I will say this. If we think that, for instance, Kroger they're right up the road in Cincinnati is where they're headquartered, grocery store chain, multiple brands under that Kroger umbrella. If we are trying to kind of get their attention as a company to say, hey, we're right down the road and we would love to work with you guys, why not reach out to people we might know at Kroger or other Kroger folks to say, hey, come be on the podcast. Let's have a conversation with you. It's a better way, I think, of opening the door to that potential new business prospect conversation than spamming the hell out of them via email or inbox on LinkedIn or something. And while I won't say that we specifically, go after guests that we're going to target that person, let's break the ice with an invite to be on the show, we don't do it that intentionally. But certainly if we reach out to, like we had the CMO at White Castle on a few weeks ago, Lynn Blashford, fantastic conversation. She's actually a University of Kentucky grad, so there was a lot more to it there than just we would love to work with White Castle. But opening the conversation with her certainly was a great first step. I have no earthly idea if we'll ever work with White Castle, but certainly would love to open that conversation, and having that connection with her because she was a guest on the podcast made perfect sense.
Yeah, and I think that's, particularly for folks in the agency world who are not comfortable doing a lot of cold outreach or those kinds of things, using a video show or a podcast, it's a great way to expand your network, whether it's for direct sales or to find people that you might be able to work with, because it's very natural. You can reach out to somebody, and I don't know about your experience, but mine is most people say yes. You may have trouble scheduling, but most people will agree to be on a video or podcast format, and they like talking about whatever it is that they're promoting, whether it's their business, themselves, whatever. So I think it's a really valuable way to expand your network, particularly if you tend to be more shy about those things.
Yeah, and it's really a win-win, right? Because Cornett and Jason Falls need a good guest for the show. We want to provide great value to our audience, and in most situations, the guest has something to promote, whether it's White Castle, sliders, or whether it's a new book that they've got. We interviewed Lee Lefevre last week. He's got a new book out that's, I think, going to be very useful to people. So everybody who's a guest on the show has something worth promoting. And so there you go. Lee's book big enough. He's getting some residual benefit from being on the show last week. But everybody's got something to promote, or they want to tell the story of their brand, which can be very useful to the audience. So it's a win-win for everyone. And then if that relationship leads to new business down the road, then that just makes it icing on the cake.
Well, I think that's the trick too. If you're going to be hosting any kind of a show, you need to make sure that it is a win for the guest as well. You can't, we all want to build a relationship. We all have curiosity. I mean, that's half the reason why I invite guests on, I think, as you said, you do, just to learn myself. But you also have to make sure that if they've got, a book to promote, or, they're pitching something, you need to make sure that you're allowing time for that as well within the format.
Yep, it's good. It's win is the way to do it. For sure.
So, I mean, speaking of that, you've got the Winfluence podcast, which you just came out with, and it's sort of teasing an upcoming book, I believe.
It is. So, yeah, Winfluence, the influence marketing podcast, is a new audio only offering. That I'm not doing that via live stream, and it really is a companion piece to a new book that I've finished writing. I'm in the editing process now with Entrepreneur Press, my publisher. It's due out in early 2021. They haven't given me a date yet, but we should be hitting dates, and pre-sales will be available at some point in the next probably month, I hope. The publishing process is a long, arduous, frustrating process for someone who can type up a blog post and have it published in 10 minutes, but at the same time, it's coming. And I wanted to create the podcast, because I'm an old radio guy. And while I love doing the live stream show, Digging Deeper for Cornett, I really wanted to sort of explore this very niche topic of influence marketing with the same types of people, influential or knowledgeable people in that space, kind of narrow in on that niche a little bit. But I wanted to do it in an audio format where I could schedule the interviews whenever I had the time to schedule them, have a really deep, interesting conversation with people who could get a little deeper, digging deeper, ironically enough, the name of the other podcast. I wanted to dig even deeper with those folks within that Winfluence or influence marketing topic. The name of the book is Winfluence, therefore the name of the podcast is Winfluence as well. But it's really a companion piece. It gives me an opportunity to continue to dive a little deeper into the case studies, into the personalities. I'm interviewing everybody from software, company executives who are building influence marketing software, to brand managers who are leveraging influencers, to the influencers themselves. And people on the agency side of things who are creating really good strategies for influence marketing. So it's sharing the case studies, sharing the successes, giving people inspiration and ideas around that specific topic. And, we're 3-4 weeks into it so far, and things are going pretty well. The subscriber numbers are looking good. Downloads are looking good. I'm having a lot of fun doing it.
And like Digging Deeper, it is a great listen, so I certainly would encourage folks to listen. I think I've heard the first 2 episodes. I'm not sure how many you've put out, but I think that's how many I've heard so far.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm bringing back the old radio skill set, the old radio production skill set. So you'll notice that the music is mixed in just at the right level, and I come in at the same time. So it's all inside baseball geek stuff for me, but I enjoy putting it together. It's a lot of fun, and the interviews are really good too.
So now I'm curious about the decision to go audio only with it and not have a video companion or video first approach. What went into that? Because I've sort of hit the point where I want to try to do video for almost all of my podcasts,
Sure.
even though I get more listenership off of the podcast typically than I do off of the videos. It's still, I like having the additional medium.
Right. I think for me, it was a combination of things. Number one, I wanted it to be easy to manage, or easier to manage.
Right.
And managing a live stream with schedules and timing, and it's got to be the same time every week and all that kind of stuff. I just said, I want to be able to record an episode on a Saturday morning with someone that, if that's the only time I can get them, I don't want to force them into a window when they can be on the show. And audio production for me is, I've done it since I was 14 years old. I started working at a radio station when I was 14. I used to play in the studio with actual vinyl LPs and reel-to-reel machines, and editing the reel-to-reel tape with a razor and all this kind of stuff. And so, making the transition eventually into digital was awesome. And I haven't had the opportunity to really kind of flex my skill set there in quite some time, just because I wasn't doing an audio only podcast. And so I thought, this is kind of a passion area for me. And so I'm going to not only follow the passion in the topic of influence marketing, but I'm really going to contain it within an audio only podcast. My hope and my idea is that I get to the point to where I have the time eventually to make it less one person being interviewed and more, let's explore a topic and actually mix in a lot of interviews and a lot of perspectives from people, and tell more of a narrative story, kind of like a report, like you would hear on, any of the Pushkin, Malcolm Gladwell stuff, revisionist history and cautionary tales. Those kind of podcasts are the ones that I really gravitate to personally. So I'd like to eventually have the time to be able to put into doing a little bit more production value, reporting through a podcast than just an interview show. But for now, I think this is a good format for me. It's easier to manage.
Gotcha. So more like the podcast by the former CEO of LinkedIn. I'm
Yeah.
blanking out, but he's got a very highly produced, that same sort of thing where he'll do the interviews, but then it gets spliced in
Yeah.
with different bits of commentary. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense, and obviously that's much more complicated if you were to try to do that with video. In a
Yeah,
first
yeah, it
format.
is. I mean, basically, you're at that point. You're producing pieces for 60 minutes,
Right.
and I want to produce the audio version of that, which is less, luggage and baggage and time consuming, and it's still time consuming, and it'll still take me a while to get to that point. But my long term vision is to have a weekly podcast that is kind of an investigation report on some sort of topic within that particular industry. It's still going to be interview based, certainly, but I would love to kind of mix it in and make it more of a storytelling podcast than just two people talking.
Right. And I think you've made a great point there, too, about thinking through if you're going to do a live stream versus recorded, that you have to think through what that means from a scheduling standpoint, both for you and for potential guests, right? So that's something that agencies should certainly be thinking about.
Yeah, and I told everyone that I started the Digging Deeper show as a result of having a weird chiropractor appointment on Tuesday mornings. I would recommend, especially if you're in the East Coast, 8 a.m. is a little problematic if you want to interview someone on the West Coast. So think about your time of day. I mean, Chip obviously has it down. Noon's pretty good time to do something like this for a live stream. But yeah, think about the time of day. Think about, how much time you got to put into it. I mean, I probably, for Digging Deeper every week, I probably put at least 2 hours into it on the day of the show. And then I also prep for about an hour with my interview questions and researching the topic and whatnot. So you're looking at, a 3-4 hour commitment. And then you've got to make sure that the equipment works and your connection works. And if you're working from home, you've got to upgrade your home internet. And
Right.
there's a lot of technical stuff that goes into making it work without errors. And even then you're going to have errors because you got to remember, from your camera to your computer to your internet service provider to Restream or whatever service you're using to distribute the stuff to the social networks themselves, to the end user watching it, there's about 12 dominoes that have to be perfectly aligned for everything to work. And if one of them falls over, the rest of them break, and you're going to have that. I've had shows where we were literally on the air and Chip was in the audience. We're literally on the air for like 8 minutes and then just goes away.
Right.
And I don't know any different because my software that I'm running it in front of me looks great, but I'm looking over on Facebook and now all of a sudden the stream's gone. So you're going to have to prepare yourself for those days too.
Yeah, and I think you absolutely need to be prepared for them, and just if it happens, it happens, right? There's no point in getting all wound up about it, because not only are there so many dominoes involved, but the dominoes change from week to week. I mean, the issue that we had at the start of this show, where I was hearing double audio, was because Restream introduced a new feature recently that I'm using, but apparently instead of just showing a video preview, it also pours the audio out, which is not very helpful. I don't know why they would do that. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
I'm
But
sure
it
there's a
happens.
reason, but it happens.
I'm sure
Yeah.
there is. I'm sure there is. It's just not a good one.
I had a show one morning. Jim Joseph, God love him, he came on the show really early one morning, and his Wi-Fi wasn't working. So so I was a little nervous about that. But then we started the show, and a few minutes into it, and we were only doing LinkedIn at the time. It was just streamed on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, for whatever reason, just dropped their ability to take video and post it. So they were having a bad day. And so I tried for 20 minutes to try to get this thing going. And I said, you know what, Jim, the cards are not in it for us today. The things are not, the stars are not aligned for us to do this. Let's just reschedule. And I literally went back upstairs, went back to bed, and started the whole day all over because I was so frustrated.
Right.
But the next time he came on, everything worked great, and it was a perfect show. And the recording was great and all that good stuff. I've had shows that were perfect shows and the damn thing didn't record. So I had nothing to post after the fact. If it weren't for the fact that there's a live stream out there, I would have lost it. So yeah, the technical problems are always fun to try to work through.
Yeah, and I do probably 6 or 7 different ones of these each week, either recorded or live or those kinds of things, and it's inevitable that every couple of weeks something goes wrong. I mean, a few weeks ago I was doing a show and I couldn't get anything to show up except the initial color bars that I had put up to start the stream, and so we just did it like an old-fashioned radio interview. So we just did the audio piece of it because that's all you can do at that point. Nothing was working.
Yeah, and the agency folks out there will appreciate this. We actually took this, live stream thing to a couple of clients, and we had one client in particular, Keeneland Thoroughbred Racetrack. They had a short summer meet to replace 5 days that they missed in their spring racing calendar, and so, but there was no fans, so we produced a little pregame show, if you will, 30-minute, preliminary show for the races that were certainly streamed live for people, but we brought some of that sort of Keeneland experience to a live stream. The first day we did the show, one of the two software packages we were using had a server error, and we were unable to record what we needed to record, and we were having problems getting the live stream to actually go live. So we started the show at the scheduled time, and it didn't distribute, it didn't go out. And that was the first day for a client project. So I had to, we had to figure out what are we going to do. So what we did is we immediately shifted to a different software to record the live show, and it was late getting on, which was disappointing and frustrating for that first day, but we packaged the live show, uploaded it to our distribution software to push out there when the recording was fully uploaded. We were probably about an hour and 15 minutes late getting on with the show the way it was supposed to be aired, but we got the show done. We got it out the door, and then the next day we moved everything up 3 hours. We pre-recorded and then streamed the recording as opposed to trying to do it live, so that we didn't have to deal with those technical issues. So you have to kind of snap from being an agency person producing a video for a client to being a live TV truck producer and making decisions like you're running NBC. And we did what we had to do to get it done, and we got it done. It was disappointing and frustrating, but we fixed it, and all of the other successor shows from that point on went pretty well.
Right. Well, and I think that raises the good point, too, that, it's important to have some contingency plans. There'll be things you don't think of, but, if you can think through, well, if this happens, how will I react? To have backups of as much stuff as possible. So I have multiple cameras and microphones. So if one of them, dies, I, hopefully can swap one in without too much fuss. I've started recording all of my live streams now in addition to the live stream, just in case, because a few weeks ago I was doing a live stream with actually it was a recorded one, but it was recording in the cloud. I was using StreamYard, and it looked fine to me, but the final recording that I got from StreamYard, I was all pixelated. My guest was fine, and you could hear me fine, but I was all pixelated. So I try to have redundancy for all of my recording.
The redundancy, the checklists, the things you have to worry about. If you have someone who is technically oriented and knows a little bit about the broadcast stuff or can learn, who also has an anxiety disorder, those are the people you want with the checklist saying, did we check this? Did we do this? Did we do that? Because they're the ones who are not going to forget anything.
Right. But at the same time, don't panic. Right. When something goes wrong, and it will go wrong, don't panic. Right. Yeah. First of all, people are fairly forgiving. Right. I mean, we've discovered that, for the most part, people go with the flow, but you just kind of have to figure out your path forward.
Well, and that's definitely true for the person on camera. If you've got 3 or 4 people helping, nobody needs to panic. But the person on camera, if you panic, everybody's going to see it.
Right.
If you're on the air, so that's where you just got to be like, hey, you know what? We'll figure it out. It'll be fine. If we screw it up today, we'll come back tomorrow. It'll be okay.
Right, exactly. Life moves on. So as we come towards the end of our time here, if someone is listening to this and they're now inspired, they want to start either a video program or a podcast, how would you suggest they get started? Should they start with thinking about the technical stuff, the content? Where do you begin?
Well, I'm a big fan of just do it. Pick one platform. Maybe it's LinkedIn, maybe it's Facebook, maybe it's Instagram Live, some live platform, and just start experimenting. My show started as me goofing off on Facebook Live. And a couple of weeks into it, I realized, wait a minute, there's something here. People, for whatever reason, are watching me blabber into a camera and a microphone on Facebook on Tuesday mornings. There's got to be some substance to that. And I then started thinking, okay, what can I do to actually provide them with substance? So I would share my thoughts on some marketing news item of the day. And then eventually I was like, well, why don't I just use one of these other softwares that's out there that allows me to bring a guest in, like Chip's doing with me today, and let's interview some people and make it really useful for folks. So I'm a big fan of just just do something, even if you're just experimenting, so that you can get a feel for doing it, so that you can get a feel for the technical issues, and then sit down and say, okay, I feel comfortable doing this. Now let's put some official parameters about it. Let's use a StreamYard or a Restream or some software to put it on multiple networks. Those two softwares, as well as plenty of others, have the production capability to do all this fancy lower third stuff and split screen cameras, stuff like that. Let's start to look into those platforms, invest a little bit in it, and sort of carve out, okay, what's the show going to look like? How are we going to do it? What's the timing going to be? What's the right time of day, the right week of the day of the week to do it? But I say start by experimenting. Play on your own personal account. Get a feel for live streaming, what you can do with it, how you can look at the comments and integrate those if you want to. And then when you get really comfortable with it, then let's start to put some paint on the walls and some art on the windows or on the walls and make it look and sound like a real show. But you got to be comfortable with it before you launch, I think.
Right. Well, I think that's a good point because really, as the technology continues to evolve, there's always room for experimentation here, right? Yeah. So even if you've been doing a show successfully for a year or two, you're going to want to try to find new things that you can introduce into it, or maybe you want to adjust the timing or the length or those kinds of things. I mean, podcast lengths have changed fairly substantially over the years. They used to be either really short or really long, and now it's sort of settled on most of them are somewhere in that 20 to 25 minute range for the most part. And so, making sure that you're continuing to evolve as the technology does, as the audience does, I think is important.
Yeah, and listen to your audience too, because they'll tell you. Yeah. If I did a Digging Deeper at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday that lasted longer than 45 minutes, I'd lose my audience because they got to start work at 9 o'clock, most of them, right. At least on the East Coast. And so, but listen to that feedback. They'll tell you. You ask them, what guests do you want? What topics do you want us to cover? They'll tell you. It might just be a couple of people at first, but as you build an audience, they'll give you the feedback if you ask for it.
Right. Well, and I think the other thing is, you need to be comfortable in what you're trying to accomplish with it. So over time, listen to the audience, but also try to keep in mind your own goals. I always tell folks, you don't necessarily need a huge audience for it to be impactful. If you've got 2 or 3 people, but they're the key 2 or 3 people, that's great. Maybe it's just the relationship you're building with the guests, and so you have nobody listening at all, which would kind of be sad. But if nobody listened at all, you still might have the benefit of the relationships, and so it might still be beneficial. So keep that in mind as you're building out, and don't just focus on I got to have as many eyeballs as possible, because let's face it, there's so many of these shows out there now. It's hard to get a lot of eyeballs, particularly for live.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, the relationships and just the synthesis of having the conversations is hugely beneficial to me. I do look at the metrics, and I want to grow Digging Deeper and Winfluence into these huge podcasts. But I also know that, Digging Deeper is in the marketing niche. I'm not revisionist history. I'm not Joe Rogan. I'm going to be here. Right. And so there's probably a ceiling to what I can get. And Winfluence is here. Right. So it's just a sub-segment of the marketing world. So I can't be obsessed with the numbers. Yeah, I want to see them go up and to the right, but I'm getting so much more knowledge and understanding that just helps me do my job better by having these conversations. Right. That if there's 2 people listening, or there's 200 people listening, or 2,000 people listening, I'm pretty happy.
Right. And mine is even a thinner sliver because I'm looking for agency owners. Right. So that's a really narrow niche. But that said,
you're down there.
Yeah, but that means that I can really hyper-focus the content, too, to what they're interested in, which is nice. So, there's pros and cons to every kind of show and every kind of approach, and you just need to be thoughtful about how you're using it, I think, in your own business, in your own agency.
Very true.
So, Jason, if someone would like to learn more about you or Cornett or any of these shows, where should they go?
So, fairly simple. I'm Jason Falls everywhere. So there's a Republican candidate for something in North Carolina who hates me because we have the same name and I own all the stuff. But that's fine. But I'm Jason Falls everywhere. Cornett is typically found at Team Cornett, TEAM Cornett, on all the social channels. I would love for everyone to come by on Tuesday mornings on multiple places on those social networks to see Digging Deeper Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock. You can also subscribe to it at cornett.online/digdeep, which is a little place you can get all of our stuff. That's the YouTube channel. It might be cornett.online/diggingdeeper, spell it out, and that'll get you to where you can subscribe to the podcast. And then Winfluence is found at jason.online/Winfluence podcast. So pretty simple places to go to subscribe and learn more. And join the party.
And you should absolutely do all of those things, and particularly join the party on Tuesday mornings, because it's usually an entertaining group in the comments, and I like
It's
to come in.
led by Chip. Chip's the leader of the band of rebels there, who likes to try to throw curveballs at me to confuse me while I'm on the show, which is kind of fun. We enjoy it. It's good stuff.
Hey, you got to do it, and it makes life fun. So, um, if you're interested in seeing a replay of this show or any of the other shows, you can always go to agencyleadership.tv. And with that, that will bring to an end today's episode. And I will be back here with all of you on Wednesday at noon Eastern Time. Got a good topic on tap. It'll be a solo show on Wednesday. And then, of course, Friday is the weekly Q&A. So if you've got a question, come by on Friday at noon, or send me your question in advance, chip@agencyleadership.com, or use the Ask Chip functionality on the agencyleadership.com website. So thanks again for joining me, Jason. Thank you all for listening, and we'll be back later this week.